Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we are going to take a look at the final release for the Collecta 2021 year. It is the mini tube that they have out. It's the only one that they've released this year, and it's filled with some very, very nice looking figures. A bunch of species that I'm really excited to see get the mini treatment, so definitely some fun stuff in here, I would imagine. Although one thing I noticed straight away when looking at this is one species you can see in here is the Mapasaurus. He's right there, and if you look over here at the side of the kind of species list, there is no Mapasaurus listed on here at all, so I don't know why that was actually missed, and definitely something that Collecta could potentially, correct on future editions of this, but I'm really psyched to get each of the figures out, take a look at the newest minis from Collecta. So let's go ahead, pop this open, and check them out right now. So here we go. We've got all kinds of fun stuff. We have an Oviraptor. We've got the Mapasaurus. We have the Mercurysaurus. We've also got, I believe, a Pliosaurus in here. We have the Argentinosaurus, I think. I forget now after looking at that. We've also got a Therizinosaurus. We've also got the Draco, the Iguanodon, the Almosaurus, and the Utah Raptor. So quite the list of fun species that are included in this mini tube. And then you also have this little paper insert in here that actually I think tells us, yes, all of the, actually there's not just all of the species that are included in here, but quite a few of the other species that are included in their minifigure line. Lots of really, really cool species that are, of course, out there in the mini dinosaur line. But let's go ahead, get a closer look at each of these guys right now. So the very first one that we're going to take a look at here is the Argentinosaurus. Very similar look to the figure overall in comparison to the larger version that was released prior to this. And as far as a shrunken down version of that figure goes, it overall looks really quite nice. You can see a beautiful osteoderm-like appearance to the figure. There's lots and lots of osteoderms all over. So the sculpt and detailing aspect of the figure looks quite nice. You can see the eye is painted with a black, which is pretty much a trademark of Collecta. You can also see it over here. The eye placement isn't perfect, and I feel like the eye is definitely a little overly painted. A little too much paint on that eye for what it should be, as that head sculpt is incredibly small. But I don't feel like it takes away from the figure or anything like that. As you start to run down the neck, you can see it's got some really nice striping going on. And once you lead down into the body, that striping transitions into, the striping actually continues, but it also transitions into like some spots and stuff down here on the legs. There's not really anything else going on, it seems like, color-wise with the figure. Overall, it's just basically a brownish coloration. Although looking at it, it looks like maybe there was a little bit of like shading and stuff with a little bit of a darker brown on it here and there, but definitely a really nice interpretation of an Argentinosaurus, a species that doesn't get too many figures in general, but it's nice to have a mini from Collecta. Then we have the other sauropod here included, which is the Almosaurus, and again, really nicely done. I actually feel like the detailing aspect of this one may be better than the Argentinosaurus. You can actually see some decent detailing included up here on the head sculpt. The eye appears to be painted a little bit nicer than what we had seen on the Argentinosaurus. Like, you can really see how nice that detailing aspect is to the head sculpt of this figure. I almost feel like the mini may look a little better even than the larger figure that they have out. They've also given it a really nice paint job as far as this kind of like almost like a reddish brown coloration that they have, but they've nicely dry brushed over all of that skin detail throughout the figure, which makes it really pop and makes it in general look quite realistic for something so small like that. Detailing aspect is brought out beautifully with that dry brushing that they've given it, and overall I feel like it really makes the figure a very appealing look as far as the realism goes, but also just generally the coloration. And they've also kind of given it a few areas of like shading and stuff. You can see right here in like the insides of the legs, you can see a little bit of like a darker coloration. Gorgeous sculpt as always, really similar to the actual larger release that Collecta had released prior to this. And again, another species of sauropod you don't see get figures very often, and really, really beautiful looking as far as this one here goes. As far as this mini goes, this one may actually be my favorite out of all of them, and I haven't even looked at most of them yet. The next one would be the Therizinosaurus, and you can see that as far as this one goes, it seems like it almost has like the bare minimum as far as paintwork, and that seems to be something that most often happens with these minis. You can't expect too much paintwork on these very small minifigures. They basically just give you the basic amount of paint application, and if you want a more detailed paint job, you would of course pick up the larger figures of these. But I've always been a big fan of the Therizinosaurus from Collecta. I always really quite like that figure. But I will say that the feathers up here on the back of the head almost make it look like it has like an 80s styles rock band type of a look as far as the... it almost looks like it has longer hair to it, but I'm not a huge fan of the way... Oh, now it's not focusing. A huge fan of the way that the feathers come off right there in that area, but overall you can see some really nice feathering to the figure. And for something so small, it's impressive that they can get that much detail into the figure. You can also see a little bit of like the hint of the green down here on the feet. Primarily, you basically just have like a brown and a green, and then of course the eyes are painted, but there's not too much else going on paint-wise with the figure. But overall, again, I think they did do a good job on this one also. Really nice detailing. It's very highly detailed for its size. Another really cool figure that isn't my favorite, but it's definitely nicely done. Then we've got the Pliosaurus, and this one I think looks really good. You can see a beautiful, kind of a glossy look to it, as it is an aquatic species, so you would expect it to have a little bit of a glossy look to it. There isn't too much going on with it paint-wise, but you can see that there's a nice light underbelly here, as well as a type of a green up here on the back, almost like a military type of a green. And then you can see that the eyes are painted perfectly. The teeth as well are painted quite nicely, and you do have a nice purplish coloration there for the inside of the mouth. Again, the actual paintwork on this one, of course this figure is quite a bit larger than every other figure included in here, but I feel like the paintwork on this one is a little bit more carefully done than the others, and also looks quite nicely reminiscent of the larger version that they do have out. But detail-wise, this thing is off the charts gorgeous for even being a minifigure. It is still really nicely detailed. Paint-wise, it's quite basic, but includes a little bit more paint than you see on some of the others because we now have paint on the inside of the mouth, and I feel like this is the best one so far as the eye paint goes. Really beautiful figure for sure. I'm definitely a big fan. Now, I don't know if I like this one or the Almosaurus more. That's a tough call. We also have the Oviraptor, which the Oviraptor from Collecta is definitely not one of my favorite Collecta figures. And you can see that still with this one, with the minifigure, although it is pretty decent considering the age of the original Collecta Oviraptor, it's just not really the best interpretation out there of an Oviraptor. But as far as this minifigure goes, it still looks pretty fun. It's the first one that we've taken a look at here in this batch that actually has a little base included. You can see some alternate coloration there as we lead out into the wings. You can see like a orangish brown is included, and that orangish brown makes it come back up here on the face, and you can see that it kind of darkens, it seems like, on the beak to a little bit of a darker brown, and then you have a really nice blue to highlight the head up there on the crest. You also have the painted eyes there with a black, which I do believe actually do sport a gloss coat. Yes, you could definitely see a gloss coat. The inside of the mouth of the Oviraptor is not painted. You can see the tongue there, but there's no paint inside the mouth. And the detailing aspect looks pretty good. Like, you can actually see some pretty decent feather detail to the figure for its very small size. It's just not the most appealing figure included here in the set, but still pretty fun. Then we have the Mercurysaurus, and this one looks really good if you ask me. Detail-wise, like, look at the actual texturing to the skin and everything. And even the paintwork is really well done on this one. Very, very reminiscent to the larger figure that was released prior from Collecta. You can see the beautiful blues up here that kind of run back and forth in between that nice yellowish brown. Gorgeous detailing even up on the frill. You can see a nice osteoderm appearance to the frill. You even have all of the horns painted with a nice gray, as well as the beak, which all of that paint looks pretty much picture perfect. The eyes are painted with a nice black. So there's some very nice paintwork up here on the face, nice and carefully done. And then as you lead back into the body, again, the detailing aspect is quite staggering on this minifigure. You can also see the quills are painted, and they've shaded some areas with a darker brown, like the quills, for instance, as well as some areas of like the musculature of the legs and stuff. And then you also have this lighter brown, which is the primary body color, but really beautifully done. Again, as far as the kind of like a shrunken down version of the larger figure, which the larger figure isn't really that big to begin with, but this thing is just gorgeous. This one now may be my favorite. I don't know. It's so hard to choose. Then we have the Utah Raptor, which I only recently actually got a hold of the larger Utah Raptor, which again isn't all that large, but I just recently got my hands on the actual regular Utah Raptor from Collecta, so that review will actually be coming up pretty soon. But as far as this miniature version goes, you can see that again, the detailing aspect is quite nicely done. Overall, it definitely has some nice feather detail included for something so small. Again, the amount of detail that Collecta manages to include in their figures is really, really impressive. There isn't too much going on paintwork-wise on this one. You can only really see like a different shade of color up there on the head, as the brown's a little lighter up in the head, transitions to a darker brown for the body. And there's a little bit of a lighter color on the underside, but there's not too much else it seems going on as far as paintwork on this Utah Raptor, but it does look very reminiscent as far as the coloration goes to the original one. But you can also see the eyes are painted with a nice black coloration. The one looks a little sloppy, but it's not too bad. Unfortunately, the teeth are not painted, neither is the inside of the mouth, so the Pliosaurus definitely holds a 1-up on this one, and so far is the only one that actually sports some mouth paint inside the mouth and stuff, but it's still a pretty fun Utah Raptor. The next one would be the Iguanodon, and this is a gorgeous figure as far as the larger original one, and I am really impressed with this one as far as a minifigure goes. That is beautiful. It honestly looks pretty much just as nice as the larger version did. Like, that is really, really well done. The paint application is beautifully applied all over with a really nice dry brushing, making sure all that detail pops. You have these gorgeous variations of green throughout the figure, very reminiscent to the original. You also have those kind of black spots and stuff that show up here and there throughout the animal, and you can also see the eyes are painted picture perfectly, and all the detail on the face as well has been brought out beautifully with that dry brushing. You can see that the beak as well is painted with a darker color. Unfortunately, we don't have any paint yet again on the inside of the mouth. I would have liked to have seen some paint on the inside of the mouths. I know they're really small, but it still would have been nice to just attempt to include some. You can see the underside also sports a little variation of a lighter green down here. So really impressive, honestly, as far as the paintwork on this figure goes. This is definitely a really, really nicely done version of the Iguanodon from Collecta. I would say pretty much as nice as the actual original one. That is a gorgeous figure. And then we have the shrunken down Draco, and this one looks pretty good until you get to the teeth, and I think the teeth look a little bit crazy. And I know that the actual figure and species, of course, had teeth similar to that, but the teeth on this one just a little bit, I think it's just that the paint is a little too thick, or maybe it's a little too bright. I don't know exactly what it is, but it almost makes it look like a donkey because of it. But at the same time, it's still quite nice. I mean, once you move past the fact that the paint is a little bit thick on the teeth, I think it also is the fact that the teeth aren't individually sculpted, making them kind of look like they're just all like giant teeth kind of combined. And that's like a little bit of a downside, but there's not much you can do in a situation like this with a miniature figure of something like that. So I think Collecta honestly did as good of a job as they possibly could on the miniature version of this. But you can see that the coloration on it as well is really quite nice. You have that kind of reddish coloration there leading back on the beak, transitions to the black like you see on the larger figure. You can see the tongue and everything inside the mouth, so that looks really quite nice. There are also other teeth in there that are not painted, unfortunately. But for the most part, it looks okay. You can see the eye is painted with like a blue and then given a black pupil. You have a little hint of like yellow up there on the crest. And then you also have some nice grays here on the wings of the figure, as well as the feet and hands are painted with a yellow. All very, very similar to the original figure. And of course, the sculpt, the pose, everything is pretty much the same as the original figure. It's all really nicely done. You also have that gray here on the underside of the figure as well. But it honestly looks really, really nice in miniature form, minus the teeth in the front. So I personally am quite happy with it. It's nice that they chose to put a pterosaur in here like they usually do. And it was a very nice choice of pterosaur species to include. I'll be really interested to see if some of the other larger pterosaurs get put into the minifigures in the future from Collecta, but this one definitely is quite nice also. And the final figure would be the Mapasaurus, and this is the one that I was probably the most excited about as far as these minis go, and man is that nice. Look at how beautiful that is. Very reminiscent, of course, to the original figure, and I'm a huge, huge fan of the original Mapasaurus, but the actual coloration on this, I think, is some of the nicest paintwork that we've seen on any of these minis in here. You can see that there's lots of really nice tones of green included, gorgeous sculpt, lots of really nice osteoderms all over the figure as well. The teeth are painted right there. You can see a little hint of like the reddish coloration on the crest and up above the eye. The eyes are painted with a black. You also have paint on the inside of the mouth and there on the tongue and stuff, so that also helps with the overall appeal factor to the figure. Beautiful paintwork, honestly. Like, they've done a great job of like shading certain areas with darker greens and everything throughout the figure, and the pose, of course, is just incredibly nice. You also have the base right there, which looks really good as well. So this Mapasaurus is definitely my favorite. It was a close call throughout this entire tube, but the final one ends up being my favorite, and man, is it ever a beautiful, beautiful Mapasaurus. As far as the sizes of the figures go, we're definitely not going to sit here and measure each and every one. That would just take forever. We will, however, hold the tape measure above them so you can get an idea at least of how big they are size-wise. Like the Almosaurus is around the 3.5-inch range or 9 centimeters, just kind of to give you an idea of what one of them would be size-wise. And like height-wise, you can see they're very, very small overall. The Argentinosaurus is only about 2.5 inches or 6.5 centimeters in height. Now I'm trapped to the backdrop here, but as far as a size comparison goes, to help you a little more, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colossaurus, and Robert Muldoon from the Mattel Jurassic World toy line next to our Collect Day minifigures, and you can without question see how insanely small they truly are. They're probably some of the smallest minifigures that you'll ever find. Definitely similarly sized to all of the previous Collect Day minifigures, so if you happen to have any of the mini tubes from Collect Day prior to this, you'll already have a pretty good idea roughly of what the size of each of the figures probably is. But if not, hopefully these guys in comparison will help you out. So this is the final 2021 release from Collect Day. That is very sad if you ask me, because it's upsetting that we're already at our end of new figures for Collect Day's 2021 year. So I just have to sit back now and await next year's line, but these figures were all incredible. Every single one of the 2021 Collect Day figures were all incredible. I honestly cannot pick out a bad figure from any at all. Not a single figure I would say is a bad figure, and this tube was a great way, in my opinion, to end it, because I feel like there are so many really cool species included now in the mini line from Collect Day, and they've really done a great job overall on so many of these. Like, there are a few that are kind of lackluster, I would say, like the Utah Raptor, the Oviraptor are, a little iffy. The Therizinosaurus is okay. There's just not that much to them. But some of the really good ones, I would say, would be the Mercurysaurus, the Iguanodon, the Almosaurus, the Pliosaurus, and the Mapasaurus are all absolutely excellent and really, really nicely done figures. I am incredibly impressed with each of the figures that I just mentioned, but that's not to say that the other figures included in this batch are bad, because by no means are they bad. There's not a single bad figure really in here, and the only thing that maybe you could get a slight complaint about would be some of the paint isn't really that great on some of them. Like, they have a little bit of sloppy paint in the eyes, and some just have like the bare minimum amount of paint, but that's kind of what you expect from minifigures. When you go into a tube like this, you don't really expect to get the most highly detailed paint jobs on your figures. You kind of expect, again, like the bare minimum, and some of these I would say would definitely have exceeded my expectations by a mile, like the Iguanodon and the Mapasaurus and the Almosaurus, and even the Mercurysaurus. As far as like paintwork goes, they're really, really well done. And again, as a whole, I definitely think that this is a great tube, including some really cool species. You have animals from land, air, and water as well, so you've got lots of variety included in this tube. And again, the final release from Collect Day for the 2021 line is definitely a great tube of mini dinosaurs and other prehistoric animals. So if you would like to pick this up, again, make sure you keep checking back to everythingdinosaur.com, so when this does come into stock, you can pick it up right away, because it is definitely, unquestionably worth a purchase. It is a great set overall. And make sure you also like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.